Spectrovision Radio.
Okay, guys, I'm just going to be honest with you. As I was preparing the typical introduction, preamble, dramatic viral hook to start this video off with the gusto that it deserves, I decided to throw all that stuff away because nothing that I could say was going to do justice to the extraordinary information that I'm going to present to you guys in this video. This is part 2 of the analysis and assessment of the gateway process. And as wild and bananas bonkers as part 1 was, I cannot overstate just how mind-blowing this information that I'm about to present to you is. We're going to dive into, amongst other things, how to leave this reality, which we find out is holographic, how to have out-of-body experiences and astral projection experiences, how to time travel, how to remote view, how to heal your body with your thoughts, how to manifest physical matter reality into this world by using nothing but this guy up here, how to traverse dimensions, how to go to other realities, and what to do when you run into, inevitably, the non-human intelligence, parentheses, aliens, that inhabit these dimensions. We're going to learn and dive into all of those topics and so much more. So I don't even want to sit here and continue explaining it. I just want to dive right into this. So come on, let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Conscious Observers. We're doing another one of our book report style videos, backed by popular demand. People are really liking these, and I like doing them. So today is part 2 of the analysis and assessment of the gateway process. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend you do. I'm not going to go in depth about what this is because I already covered it extensively in part 1, so go watch that. But just as a quick recap, because you're already here, and a reminder, if you have watched part 1, just a little refresher, this was a document that was prepared by Wayne McDonald, Lieutenant Colonel in Military Intelligence for the U.S. Army in 1983. They sent him out on a mission to learn everything he could about consciousness and reality so he could come back and teach them everything, and it would become the foundation for our psychic spy program. This is back during the Cold War, and we're competing with Russia. And when he went out to learn all these things, he found the Gateway program at the Monroe Institute, and it worked so incredibly well, it sent him scrambling trying to figure out how this worked, because he had to come back to his superiors and explain to them how this worked so well. So he had to dive into all the worlds of consciousness and the occult and mysticism and things like quantum physics and quantum mechanics. He had to dive into all these worlds to make sense of his experience at the Monroe Institute and to be able to put this analysis and assessment of the Gateway process together. And in doing so, it blew his mind, changed his life, changed the Army and the entire military, and changed our world. This information was classified for decades until it was finally quietly unclassified. And now we have it. We have this extraordinary, game-changing, world-changing, life-changing information right here in this book, and we're going to dive right in. Like I said, this is part 2. So if you haven't seen part 1, please do that. But you're already here, so might as well finish this video and then go watch it, okay? And you might have to watch it a couple times because it's incredibly dense. This information, I think the reason they declassified it, which is still extraordinary to me, I don't know why they did. I think it's because they don't think anybody can make sense of this. It's such high level, such complex information. I think that they probably thought, just put it out there. It's just going to seem like gibberish to people, but it's not gibberish, okay? Even though the guy who wrote this does not know how to make sentences. He just writes in long paragraphs. And I think it's because he's in a flow state. He's just going. So what I do is I read it and then I process it and then I explain it. So if it seems at times like it's kind of like, oh my God, like over your head and it's just going on, don't worry. I'm about to get to a stopping point and I'm going to break it down for you. All right. So I thought this was funny. The first half was just, it felt like my brain was pouring out of my ears like butter, like it had just completely melted. And then we get to this part about halfway through where he says, up to this point, our discussion of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. And I'm just like, who are you talking to? But anyways, we made it through part one. Okay, we did it, guys, and I think that y'all were there with me. You know, we were on the same level. We were making sense of all this, but it's jumping up a notch here. Okay, I mean that was just a warm up, so it's go time now. So now we're on section 18. Okay, 18. We made it through 17 sections in the first part, and we're gonna finish this bad boy in this one. 18 is time, space, dimension. It starts. Let me get a drink of tea. All right, I'm ready, guys. Let's do this. Up to this point, our discussion of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. Now the fun begins. Gateway involves more than just perception of those aspects of the universal hologram, which can be assessed in the dimension of time-space as we know it. To explain how and why human consciousness can be brought to transcend the limitations of time-space, foreshadowing, is the next task which must be addressed. To do this, we must first appreciate what time and space are in order to understand how the dimension that they constitute can be transcended. So essentially, when he went to the Monroe Institute, he left time and space completely, left this reality. So as he has to explain what happened to his superiors, he has to explain that. So he's like, okay, well, to explain that, I have to explain what time and space are. So that's what we're doing now. Physicists define time as a measurement of energy or force in motion. In other words, it is a measurement of change. However, in order for energy to be in motion, it must first be limited in some way within the confines of some sort of vibratory pattern so that its confinement gives it the capacity for being contained at a specific location which is distinguishable from other locations, space. Energy which is not confined is force without limit, without dimension, without the limits of form. It is infinity, cannot move because there is nothing beyond infinity, and is therefore outside of the dimension of time. So he's basically saying, to have space, you have to have boundaries. To have time, you have to have change. And those are the things that kind of make our universe. There has to be a boundary to our universe because you have to be able to say, this thing is in this place. And for it to be in a place, it kind of has to have a coordinate. It has to have a relationship to other things. And it has to have a boundary at some point to confine that space and to separate it from, you know, whatever is outside of time and space. Because that's what he's saying. He's like, if I left time and space, then that means that space has an end. It has a limit, a boundary, or else he couldn't have left it. See what I mean? Okay. It is also beyond space. It is also beyond space because that concept implies that a specific energy form is limited to a specific location and is absent from other locations. But if energy is in the state of infinity, there are no boundaries, no here to differentiate from there, no sense of area. Energy in infinity means energy uniformly extended without limit. It has no beginning, no end, no location. It is conscious force, the fundamental, primal power of existence without form, a state of infinite being. Energy in infinity is said to be completely at rest and therefore cannot generate holograms so long as it remains utterly inactive. It retains its inherent capacity for consciousness in that it can receive and passively perceive holograms generated by energy in motion out of the various dimensions which make up the created universe, but it cannot be perceived by consciousness operating in the active universe. Energy in this state of inactive infinity is termed by physicists as energy in its absolute state, or simply the absolute. Throughout this document, the absolute is actually another word for God. God is the state of rest. Between the absolute and the material universe, in which we experience our physical existence, are various intervening dimensions to which human consciousness in altered states of being may gain access. Theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capability until it reaches the dimension of the absolute, at which point perception stops because the absolute generates no holograms of or about itself. So this is all extremely fascinating because basically what he's saying is that we're in a place called time-space. It's kind of like this bubble. And outside of time-space are these intervening dimensions. But then way, way outside of time-space is the absolute. And the absolute is perfectly at rest, okay? It's perfectly at rest. It does not create holograms. When they say holograms, we are holograms. This physical matter reality is holograms. Everything's holographic in this universe. They explain that. We explained that in part one about this is a holographic universe. So what they're saying is in the absolute, everything's at rest and there are no holograms being perceived or received or projected. We do all that outside of the absolute. And we have all these abilities and all these things we can do in this dimension and other dimensions. But once you get back to the absolute, everything goes to rest. And there is no more creation or receiving of holograms. We'll get more into that in a little bit. It's very exciting. Number 19 is intervening dimensions. Since the absolute is conscious energy in infinity, i.e. without boundaries, it occupies every dimension to include the time-space dimension in which we have our physical existence, but we cannot perceive it. So what they're saying is the absolute is conscious energy, and that conscious energy permeates everything. We just don't see it, but it's there. It occupies every single dimension, including ours. So the absolute is not contained. It's boundary. It has no boundaries. Okay. So even though it's like they consider it outside of time space, it's actually they use a metaphor in the. I'll give you a little preview of a metaphor we're going to use in a minute. But they talk about how basically look at an ocean and we're at the top and we're like the wavy, chaotic top of the water. And then the intervening dimensions are underneath that, and they're getting like more and more stable and calm as they go down and more dense. And then at the very bottom is the absolute. And the absolute, like at the bottom of our ocean, if you go down to the very, very bottom of the deepest part of the ocean, it looks perfectly still. Like when you see those like deep underwater cameras, it doesn't look like, there's no waves or anything like that. It's very, very still. So that's like the absolute. And then we're at the top and it's all chaotic and crazy. But if you think about it, the whole thing is water. So that absolute at the bottom is made of the same stuff as the stuff at the top. It just behaves differently. It's basically what they're saying here. And then the different intervening dimensions in between where we are, physical matter reality, and the absolute, there's all these different dimensions, just like there's different layers in the ocean. And each one kind of has its own flavor, style, different laws of nature, laws of physics, that kind of stuff. Okay. To enter these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus with such intense coherence that the frequency of the energy pattern which comprises that consciousness, i.e. the brainwave output, can accelerate to the point where the resulting frequency pattern, if displayed on a oscilloscope, that's a fun word, oscilloscope. If displayed on an oscilloscope, would look virtually like a solid line. Achievement of this state of altered consciousness sets the stage for perception of non-time-space dimensions because of the operation of a principle in physics known as Planck's distance. This is an aspect of quantum mechanics which applies to the fact that any oscillating frequency, such as a brainwave, reaches 2 points of complete rest, which constitute the boundaries of each individual oscillation, i.e. movement up or down. Without these points of rest, an oscillating wave pattern would be impossible since the points of rest are required to permit the energy to change direction and thus constitute vibrating between rigid limits. But it is also true that when, for an infinitesimally brief instant, that energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, it clicks out of time, space, and joins infinity. See Exhibit 3. That critical step out of time, space occurs when the speed of the oscillation drops below 10 to the negative 33rd centimeters per second, Planck's distance. To use the words of Bentov, quantum mechanics tells us that when distances go below Planck's distance, which is 10 to negative 33rd centimeter, we enter, in effect, a new world. Okay, let me explain that. And if y'all can see, I'll show you the image here, that picture. But if you can't see, don't worry, I will explain it. Okay, so what they're saying is that when waves oscillate, meaning they go up and down, okay? So just imagine like a wave in the ocean going up and down, or a sound wave going up and down. It can't go up forever, okay? And it can't go down forever. At some point it goes up and it has to stop and come back down. Well, those points where it stops, it's almost like, imagine this, like you're on a roller coaster and you drop, like you go up the hill and then you drop to come down and you're like weightless for just a second at the very top, right? That's what these do. So what they're saying is, for an infinitesimally small time, when that wave goes up and then stops and comes back down, when it goes up and stops, or when it goes down and stops to turn, to go back up, for that tiny, tiny infinitesimal moment, it clicks out of this reality, because the up and the down is what creates this reality. But that little stoppage clicks out, but only clicks out for a tiny brief moment in time until, let's continue. To return to our case in point, the human consciousness wave pattern reaches such high frequency that the pattern of clickouts comes so close together that there is virtually continuity. continuity, continuity in it. Then a portion of that consciousness is actually postulated to establish and maintain its information collection function in those dimensions located between time, space, and the absolute. Thus, as the almost continuous click-out pattern establishes itself in continuous phase at speeds below Planck's distance, but before reaching the state of total rest, human consciousness passes through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice, beginning her journey into Wonderland. I think it's kind of interesting that they threw in that whole Alice in Wonderland thing, considering how scientific and rigid and analytical this entire document is. But here's what they're saying, and this is freaking wild. What they're saying is that human consciousness operates like a wave, okay? It's energy, and energy operates at a wave, okay? And whenever you're doing gateway, instead of that wave being kind of drawn out like a regular wave, it's pushed together. So imagine a wave like that, that's kind of drawn out like a regular wave, and you smash it together, where the ups and the downs, so those click outs are pushed together to where they're touching. Okay. So you know how before I said, okay, it goes up, it stops and comes down, goes up, stops, comes down. And they're like spread out. Imagine that little tiny point where it gets to the top and it free falls. Imagine you squished all those together and it has continuity to it. That is where you click out. Okay. At the Monroe Institute, I was there for a week and I did a bunch of these things. And we use the term clicking out because a lot of times with hemisync, especially, you'll be doing your practice, your meditation, that kind of stuff, and you'll lose consciousness. And you might think, oh, you fell asleep, right? You're meditating, but it's not sleep. And there's a distinctly different feel to it. You're clicking out. And when you click out, they've actually taken a lot of care at the Monroe Institute to create new technology. So hemisync is kind of the old school stuff that like Mark Serto and Robert Monroe and Tom Campbell, those guys created like decades ago. Now they have like Monroe Sound Science, and Ignacio, a good friend of mine, he's an amazing sound engineer, and he's taken great care to create the newer stuff so that you don't click out as easy, because hemisync is kind of notorious for clicking out. But the crazy thing is when you click out, you don't fall asleep. You'll wake up, like usually Robert Monroe's voice brings you back and it's very soothing, and he'll be like, now we're coming back to our physical body. And you're kind of like, whoa, like what the fuck happened? Like it's crazy because you know you didn't fall asleep, but you know you weren't conscious. You're somewhere else. And you usually come back because it says specifically here, then a portion of that consciousness is actually postulated to establish and maintain its information collection function. That's a very fancy way of saying memory. Its information collection function in those dimensions located between time, space, and the absolute. What they're saying is when you click out, you go to those intervening dimensions, right? Remember the sea metaphor? So we're at the top, the roiling, crazy waves, and the absolute's at the very bottom, complete rest. In between, there's all these dimensions. When you click out, you go into those dimensions. And even though you're not conscious, you retain your memory. You retain not necessarily your memory, because a lot of times you don't remember it. You retain your information collecting ability. So even though you might not remember it, you can retrieve that information. So when you click out, you can come back and say, like go into like another short meditation, or like if it's bedtime, go to sleep and subconsciously program yourself. Say, I want to remember what happened, retrieve the information from that click out. I want to remember it, and either bring it down from your higher self during like a meditation, or, in your sleep, have your subconscious retrieve it for you. So when you wake up, you can recall it and say, okay, now I want to recall that information, because that information's there. You have it. You just don't remember it. So the click out thing's crazy. And the way it works is like your consciousness is a wave. You're squishing through doing gateway. You're squishing that wave pattern together so that click out part at the top and the bottom are continuous. And that is where you click out of this reality. It's so wild. And there's a lot of science behind this, and this picture is really, really cool, but I know a lot of y'all are just listening and not looking. So I'll put this on my Patreon. You can see it there. The gateway experience with its associated hemisync technique is apparently designed, if used systematically and patiently, to enable human consciousness to establish a coherent pattern of perception in those dimensions where speeds below Planck's distance apply. This holds true irrespective of whether the individual is exercising his consciousness while in the physical body, or whether he is doing so after having separated that consciousness from the physical body, i.e. the so-called out-of-body state mentioned earlier. So basically what they're saying is whether you're in an out-of-body state, which they teach you at the Monroe Institute, or you're still in your body, but you're just kind of astrally, exploring these dimensions, all this stays true. You don't have to be in an out-of-body state to do this. So crazy. And that's just the first part. Let's keep going. Number 20, subatomic particles. The behavior of subatomic particles provides an interesting example of the phenomenon of clicking out, discussed in the preceding paragraphs. In an article prepared for Science Digest magazine, Dr. John Gliedman mentions the way in which subatomic particles communicate with each other once their energy fields become entrained as a result of colliding with each other. The communication concerned is, of course, postulated to be occurring during the click-out phase in the oscillation of the energy fields comprising the subatomic particles concerned. It is this cause which accounts for the cross-communication at what in terms of time-space velocities would seem to involve speeds in excess of light. Faster than the speed of light. Didn't think that was possible. According to these guys, it is. In reality, Einstein's theory of relativity is not being invalidated, but rather the communication concerned is taking place outside the dimension of time-space to which the theory of relativity is strictly confined. Specifically, Dr. Gliedman tells us, quantum theory postulates a kind of long-range Siamese twin effect whenever two subatomic particles collide and then go their different ways. Even when the particles are halfway across the universe from each other, it says, they instantaneously respond to each other's actions, and in doing so, they violate relativity's ban on faster-than-light velocities. So basically what they're saying is we know that quantum entanglement is a real thing. They've proven that in a lab. And it shouldn't happen. This is why Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, and he did not like quantum mechanics because it violated his theory of relativity. And he was very fond of that theory. Made him very famous. But we know that it happens, but we don't really know how. Indeed, regarding attempts to quantify what is known about the behavior of energy in dimensions apparently outside of time and space, Bentov speaks about courageous physicists who are working on hypothetical particles called tachyons, which can move at speeds higher than light. The speed of tachyons starts just above the speed of light and ranges all the way to infinite velocities. So tachyons are super interesting. They're theoretical, okay? We have not proven them because when you're inside of what I call the simulator, our reality, you can only observe what's inside. So imagine you're a character, say you're in Grand Theft Auto, and you're the character, and you wake up and you realize you're a character in a game. You can only analyze the game. So you could figure out all the physics of the game mechanics and the game engine, all that kind of stuff. And you would be like, I figured it all out. I mapped it all. But that's only what's inside the game world. You wouldn't have any access or knowledge to everything outside the game world, which is most of reality, okay? That's kind of how we are. So our physics is basically everything from light speed down. We can't study and see and experience and measure anything above the speed of light. But in theoretical physics, there's something called a tachyon, and a tachyon exists just above the speed of light and all the way up to infinity. And everything that we can see and study exists at the speed of light and down. Okay, so there's kind of like two realities. The reality inside the game, which is the speed of light and down, and then the reality outside of the game, which is the speed of light and up. And that's what tachyons are. They create something called imaginary mass, and it's not really imaginary, you have to have imaginary mathematics to solve it. So they call it imaginary because mathematicians can't solve it because we don't have the numbers and we don't have the frame of reference to do it. So they just call it imaginary, but it's not really imaginary. Anyways, that's for a different video. Number 21, dimensions in between. Now that we have postulated the legitimacy of the Now that we have postulated the legitimacy of the assertion that the energy forms which compose consciousness can move beyond the time-space dimension, we need to turn our attention to the energy forms which inhabit those dimensions between time, space, and the absolute. In so doing, we may better perceive the form that reality assumes when we encounter it in those intermediate dimensions. In this context, Bentov tells us that the causal relationship between events breaks down. Movements become jerky rather than smooth. Time and space may become grainy or chunky. Perhaps a piece of space can be traversed by a particle of matter in any direction without necessarily being synchronized with a piece of time. In short, a pair of events will occur in either time or space, the pair not being connected causally, but by a random fluctuation. Okay, this is super interesting. He's talking about the intervening dimensions. So we're in what's called time-space, this time-space continuum, which is very dependable, reliable, and we know it very well, okay? Everything's predictable here. We know how things work. It's smooth. There's a lot of cause and effect here. I know that if I knock over my coffee mug here, the stuff's going to spill out, and it's going to do it using the physics that we understand very well, and I can predict exactly, the velocity of the spillage and the coverage of the spill and whether the cup's going to break and all this stuff, right? When you get into these other dimensions, things break down. They're not so much this cause and effect based on time and space because they don't operate by the same mechanics. And things are jerky to us because we're not used to operating in these dimensions. Now, I've seen all this firsthand. When I was at the Monroe Institute, we traveled to different dimensions. And I know that sounds crazy to anybody that hasn't been there. And it sounds very normal to anyone that has been there because I went to dimensions that I literally went to a dimension that was claymation. Okay. I don't know why. I cannot explain it. And the craziest thing is in the room at the debrief, somebody else in the room, when we went back to the debrief after the mission, somebody else had gone to during the same session, but in different check units. We're in these sensory deprivation units doing the exercises. Somebody else in a different room in a different check unit, unbeknownst to me, went to a claymation realm too at the exact same time. So it was like it's an objective place. It wasn't just my imagination. Why would I imagine that? Like I've never in my life imagined going to a claymation world, or anything like that. It was very bizarre. And to have somebody else go there too at the same time was really wild. And so not just that, I went to dimensions that were hyper realistic, right? I went to one where it was like, it seemed like realer than real, what they call near-death experience studies, like super color, like colors that we don't have here, and almost like this resolution that was crisper and more vibrant than we have here. It's all sorts of different dimensions. And these are these intervening dimensions that are outside of time space, but before you get to the absolute. And they behave differently. They each have their own laws of nature and laws of physics and different rule sets. And some of them are very smooth and silky, and some of them are very jerky and like claymation-like. It's really interesting. And when we have what are called interdimensional experiences here on Earth, I did a whole video on interdimensionals before, and explaining what interdimensional is. And to me, an interdimensional is any life form or energy form that is not native to this time-space reality. So everything in this time-space reality, if you're from here, you're infused with the laws of nature, laws of physics of this reality, right? How would you not be? So say you're playing Grand Theft Auto, everything that's created inside Grand Theft Auto is going to be of the same type of stuff, right? It's going to use the same digital physics because it's all created by the same game engine, same designers, it's in the same world. But then say something from that game went out of the game or something from outside the game came in. Well, all of a sudden, everything's going to break down. It's not going to operate smoothly anymore, okay? That's how when we see interdimensionals here and people report having these experiences with not quite aliens, but not quite humans, like something in between, a lot of times they describe them as being clunky, being jerky, kind of glitching out sometimes, skipping frames, that kind of stuff. And it's because it's something that's not from this time-space reality that is now in this time-space reality. Or maybe you left this time-space reality and you went to their reality. Or maybe they're kind of merged and overlapping. Kind of like when an old radio tuner is a little bit out of phase and kind of in between stations. And you're picking up stuff from this station, picking up stuff from this station. So that's like what interdimensionals are. And that's what they describe here in this section 21, dimensions in between, is that when you're in the right dimension, things are smooth. When you're in between, they break down and they're kind of clunky. And if you go to different dimensions where you're not native to, you're not from there, things are going to be a little off, all right, to say the least. So it's super interesting. So they go on. What Bentov means is that inside the dimension of time-space where both concepts apply in a generally uniform way, there is a proportional relationship between them. A certain space can be covered by energy moving in either particle or wave form at a certain time, assuming a specific velocity virtually anywhere in the time-space universe. The relationship is neat and predictable, like we just discussed. However, in the intermediate dimensions beyond time-space, the limitations imposed on energy to put it into a state of oscillating motion are not uniform, as they are in our physical universe. A myriad of various distortions and incongruities are thus likely to be encountered, such that our nice, neat assumptions concerning the relationship between time and space as we know it in this dimension do not apply. But even more important, access is open to both the past and the future when the dimension of current time-space is left behind. Okay. So I have not, to be totally honest, I have not read through all this. So I started describing something that obviously they went into the next paragraph. But they just reconfirmed everything I told you. But it's super interesting because then they add that part about But even more important, access is open to both the past and the future when the dimension of current time-space is left behind. Essentially saying that in this time-space, everything is linear, okay? It's very predictable. But when you leave this, imagine you're in a river and you're going with the flow in the river, okay? And your buddy's next to you and you're in the river, okay? And you're both going together and you're just flowing down the river. But you hop out and you run down the riverbank and get ahead of him and hop in the river. Well, now you're way ahead of him. He's like, how the hell did you get up there? You hopped out of the stream of time. So that's basically what they're saying. Once you leave this time, space dimension, you go to the other one, you can hop around time. So you could maybe go like what we would call the future and then hop back in the same way that guy ran down the riverbank and hopped in the river at a later time. That's what they're saying you can do. It's pretty crazy. Let's continue. Number 22, special status, out-of-body experience. Although human consciousness can, with enough practice, move beyond the dimension of time-space and interface with other energy systems in other dimensions, the entire process is appreciably enhanced if that consciousness can be detached in large measure from the physical body before such interface is attempted. Essentially what they're saying is anybody at any time, well, not any time, if you go through the gateway process, anybody can go to these intervening dimensions, okay? I did. And I did it in my body. Like I never felt through any of those things. We had a whole day where we did out-of-body stuff, but through all those things, I was always in my body, like consciously in my body. I moved, they teach you how to move your perception, move your awareness, okay? And you can move your awareness anywhere you want. It's wild. But my consciousness was always in my body, I felt like. What they're saying is that if you really, really want to get deep into these other dimensions, it's best to do it in an out-of-body state because then your consciousness is free from all these physical restraints and filters. So you don't have to, but if you really want to take it to another level. Once an individual becomes proficient in the technique of out-of-body movement and then reaches the point where he is able to break out of time-space while out of his body, he gains the advantage of clicking out part of his enhanced consciousness while starting from a base located much closer to the dimension with which he wishes to communicate. In other words, since he is starting from a point much higher up, quote unquote, higher up, to use an analogy from the time-space context, that part of his consciousness involved in clicking out will have that much more time to interact in dimensions beyond time-space because less time is required to traverse the intervening dimensions. That's interesting. So basically they're just saying, like when you're in your body, it's very dense. It's almost like, I've described it in an old video of like, your consciousness is almost like in a submarine, like sinking down into this dimension here. So whenever you're out of your body, your consciousness is already up to a higher level. It's not so far down in this density. So it's closer, not like proximity wise, but like energy, vibration wise, like frequency wise, it's closer to the dimension you're wanting to go to. So you're starting off already, closer. So it's easier for you to kind of close that gap and get to the next dimension if you're not in your body. So that's very, very interesting. But, leaving your body's not easy. So it's not like, oh, let me just leave my body real quick and then go to this other dimension. They make it sound easy, but it's actually takes a pretty incredible amount of work and discipline to get to that point. Some people can do it easy, like Robert Monroe, but the average person, your body does everything it can to make sure your consciousness doesn't just leave, Moreover, once the individual is able to project his consciousness beyond time-space, that consciousness would logically tend to entrain its frequency output with the new energy environment to which it is exposed, therein greatly enhancing the extent to which the individual's altered consciousness may be further modified to achieve a much heightened point of focus and a much refined oscillating pattern. As a result, a self-reinforcing process should ensue, whereby the further consciousness in the out-of-body state can be projected beyond the time-space dimension, the more its level of energy output would be enhanced, thus promoting the potential for still further travel. Okay, sorry, I kind of butchered that one, but let's read it again real quick, okay, because I want to get this. Moreover, once the individual is able to project his consciousness beyond time-space, that consciousness would logically tend to entrain its frequency output with the new energy environment to which it is exposed, therein greatly enhancing the extent to which the individual's altered consciousness may be further modified to achieve a much heightened point of focus and a much refined oscillating pattern. As a result, a self-reinforcing process should ensue, whereby the further consciousness is in the out-of-body state can be projected beyond the time-space dimension, the more its level of energy output would be enhanced. Okay. Thus promoting the potential for still further travel. Wow. Okay. I'm glad I reread that because what they're saying is when your consciousness is in your body, it's tuned to your body. Okay. That's what it is. Like your body's like a tuning fork. It's a tuning instrument and your consciousness is tuned into it. Kind of like how you have a radio and it's picking up a radio signal and you got to get it right in tune and it's nice, crystal clear. And that radio signal is hitting that antenna and, music's coming out and it sounds crystal clear and everything. It's tuned. Everything's tuned just right. But when you go into an out-of-body state, your consciousness is now not tuned to your body. It's free. It's kind of free-flowing. It's a free agent. So basically what they're saying is when you traverse into these other dimensions at a consciousness level, now that your consciousness is not tuned to your body, it's more free. It's more open. And now it can tune to those intervening dimensions. And when it does that, it's going to become more resonant with those dimensions. It's going to be able to kind of be a part of those dimensions and really immerse itself in those dimensions because it's not struggling and fighting with, part of me is back in that body and it's tuned to that body and part of me is here and, kind of this tug of war. It's free at that point. And it can really immerse itself in those dimensions. I bet that's why when we have dreams at night, our dreams seem so real, right? Because Robert Monroe talks about how once you get to like stage 4 REM sleep, he's convinced that basically everybody leaves their body every night. And you know how your dreams seem so real, like so real? What if it's because your consciousness has left your body? Because your body sleeps, your consciousness doesn't sleep. And if your consciousness leaves your body and it's up in these intervening dimensions and it doesn't have the filtering and the flavoring and the distortions of your physical body anymore, then it can just fully subject itself and immerse itself in these dimensions. And that's probably why it seems so freaking real. You know what I mean? Wow. So like every dream you go into is almost like a little miniature lifetime. I digress. Okay. So where was I at? The tentative conclusion to be drawn is that the out-of-body state may be regarded as an extremely effective way of accelerating the process of enhancing consciousness and of interfacing with dimensions beyond time-space. If the practitioner of the gateway technique has a choice of concentrating on achieving and exploiting the out-of-body experience as opposed to concentrating his full efforts on expanding his consciousness exclusively from a physical base, the former would appear to promise much faster and more impressive successes than does the latter. Just reinforcing, if you can do all this in an out-of-body state, go for it because you'll get further. Just nuts. Just nuts. Knowing that people have been training with this stuff since 1983, and I guarantee you in the 40 plus years since, we have some ninja Jedi masters out there that are literally leaving their bodies and traversing dimensions and doing all sorts of crazy shit. I know it. I went there for a week and I was able to do some stuff that most people think I'm making up because it just sounds so ludicrous. And that was a week, okay? Some of these people have been training in this stuff for decades. I mean, there's no, and this was even written, 42 years ago. This was just breaking the surface. So imagine what some of these people are able to do now. It's wild. I mean, there's no telling. There's no limit. No limit. Number 23, absolute in perspective. It may be helpful at this point to pause and thank you. Oh. He told me to pause. I'm going to get a drink. Jesus. Hey, friend. Hope you're enjoying the episode. Just wanted to break in real quick and tell you about a course that I created called 5D Print Your Reality. This is a manifestation course based on what I learned at the Monroe Institute and the techniques in this wild book that we're going over in today's episode. I used this course to lose over 65 pounds, miraculously heal my body, start a couple successful businesses, and basically live my dream life. And these modalities and techniques are very easy to follow. The course is a whole lot of fun, and you can find it at my website, www.digijordan.com, digijordan.com. Now, back to the show. It's herbal tea. It's not too exciting, but I needed to come up for some air. We're just getting started, guys. Y'all ready? You ready for this? Number 23, absolute in perspective. So the absolute, that's infinity, that's God, that's source. It may be helpful at this point to pause and recap the major aspects of our intellectual journey from time-space to the realm of the absolute. We have spoken at some length concerning the incredibly complex hologram, which is created by the intersection of energy patterns generated by the totality of all dimensions of the universe. time-space included. We have noted that our minds constitute energy fields which interact with various aspects of this hologram to deduce information which is ultimately processed through the left hemisphere of our brains to reduce it to a form that we employ for the process we call thinking. Thank you, left brain. We have implied that this hologram is the finite embodiment and active energy form of the infinite consciousness of the Absolute. It is the title we assigned to the vast pool of energy in a state of perfect rest over which the physical universe is layered and from whence it comes. So the physical universe is like a projection of this absolute. We come from it, but we're layered on top of it, and we'll eventually return to it. Incidentally, to describe this, Bentov uses the analogy of a very deep sea, comparing the still depths of the sea to the dimension of the absolute, while assigning the storm-tossed waves above to represent the physical universe with which we are familiar. The slightly agitated currents of the sea to be found in between the turbulent surface and the totally still depths represent energy in the process of either going into rest, i.e. approaching infinity, or coming out of rest. Those are the intervening dimensions that I was talking about earlier. So it's interesting. They're kind of describing it as the absolutes at the very bottom, the physical matter realities at the very top, and in between are these intervening dimensions that are either returning to the absolute or coming up to physical matter reality, and then all the different kind of iterations in between. That's interesting. It's all interesting. 24, From Big Bang to Torus. Working from the widely accepted Big Bang theory, Bentov presents a conceptual model to depict the process of time-space evolution, the relative position of the universal hologram. That hologram is often called a torus because it is thought to have the overall shape of an immense self-contained spiral. Basing his thesis on recent studies concerning the distribution of quasars and operating on the premise that in the universe, smaller processes tend to be mirror images of larger ones, i.e. the pattern of electrons around the nucleus of an atom mirrors the way planets orbit their suns, and so on, Bentov postulates the following scenario. Kind of the as above, so below, how the brain and the neurons look like the, plasma filaments of outer space. And, so much of the macro is like a mirror of the micro. So he goes on, taking his cue from the observed capability of quasars to eject enormously concentrated beams of matter from their interiors in a controlled, non-concentric version of the Big Bang, he envisions a similar process occurring in the generation of the universe. Noting that those galaxies located to the north of our own galaxy are moving away faster than those located to the south, and that those to the east and west are demonstrably more distant, Bentov regards this as substantive evidence that the jet of matter which expanded into our universe has turned back upon itself, eventually forming an ovoid or egg shape. He sees matter in our universe entering the ovoid pattern following ejection from a nucleus composed of extremely compressed energy through a white hole. At the end of its trip to the far end of the ovoid, he sees it departing via a black hole. Okay. In Robert Monroe's third book, Ultimate Journeys, he goes on his run of the interstate, okay? And he goes to the edge of time-space. Furthest, I think, anybody, to our knowledge has ever gone in the astral. And at a certain point, his inspec friends take him to two different places. One is the emitter and one is the aperture, okay? And the way he describes it, the emitter is like a projector that projects the light that makes our holographic universe, okay? It's source light. And he describes it like a white hole. Okay, a white hole is the opposite of a black hole. White hole is like what he's talking about in those quasars. It's ejecting. It's like a jet of energy shooting out. And then a black hole, obviously, is sucking in matter and energy. So he described the emitter as a white hole, and he described the aperture as a black hole. That's super interesting because those were the two, like the emitter was where everything came from source and projected this universe. And the aperture is when you returned to source. You return to the absolute. Robert Monroe is discussing this in his books. And that was written after this. So it's not like this guy read that book. That book hadn't even been written yet. So that's super duper interesting because that's what he's talking about right now about how our universe would be this like torus, because it would basically shoot a jet out, and at a certain amount of time, it would kind of wrap around and come back to itself, but it would create this like torus shape. And there's a picture of it. Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. We're almost there. But super interesting, because Robert Monroe, when he's in the out-of-body state, exploring all these astral realms, he goes to what he calls the emitter and what he calls the aperture, which is a black hole and a white hole. So interesting. So Ishtok Bentov, who's amazing, nailed all this stuff, it seems. Okay. So in such a model, time is observed to be a measure of the change which occurs as energy evolves into new, more complex forms as it progresses along the distance from the white hole side of the nucleus around the shell of this cosmic egg until it enters the black hole. In other words, as energy expelled from infinity and confined within limits by the conscious of the absolute achieves form and motion following ejection from the white hole at the top of the egg, time begins as a measure of the cadence of this evolutionary movement as reality goes around the shell of the egg on its journey to the black hole at the far end. So basically saying, as this conscious energy shoots out of the jet, which is the white hole, on its way, as it makes a torus back to the black hole and reunites with the absolute, that journey that it takes is what time is. And that's what this time-space dimension is that journey of that conscious energy leaving the white hole, forming a torus, and coming back and eventually returning to the black hole. That dimension that it exists in is space, and then the time is basically the measurement of that journey. That's what time-space is. That's crazy. Okay. How many times? Take a shot every time I say that's crazy. Don't. Drinking's bad. Let's continue. I don't even know where the fuck I was. Number 25. Our place in time. The observed distribution of galaxies suggests that our particular universe is located near the top of the egg at the point where matter begins to fall back on itself. Okay, hold on. So I was thinking that all that whole torus shape was our universe. They're saying our universe is just a speck somewhere in that torus. So that torus is just, I guess, everything outside of the absolute. And somewhere in there, there's like a little dot. It's like, that's our universe. So we think of our universe as this like infinitely vast thing. And they're basically like, no, your entire universe is this little dot on this. Oh my God. Do you ever feel real small? Okay. The observed distribution of galaxies suggests that our particular universe is located near the top of the egg at the point where matter begins to fall back on itself, thus explaining the reason why the galaxies to the north are seen to be moving away more rapidly as they are caught up in the downturn of the stream of matter towards the far end of the cosmic egg. See Exhibit 5? Okay, let's go ahead and see Exhibit 5. For those of you watching, for those of you not, I will put all this on my Patreon. But, yeah, okay, so here, I'm just going to do this the old school way. I'm just going to show you on the camera. Actually, that's not working so well. Anyways, that's the general torus shape. And then we are, let's see, that's the white hole and the black hole. So they kind of, and then it goes out and it falls back on itself. And point where flow of time space turns towards opposite. So yeah, it'll either go this way or it'll go this way, and they both come back and fall in on themselves. Where are we? And then there's a stylized version of it. So yeah, so we're right here. It's so fascinating. Okay, y'all can't even see this. I'm showing it to myself. Anyways, I'll put all this on the Patreon. Okay. Layered over this cosmic egg is the absolute, which sustains the radiating nucleus from which the original jet of matter issued forth. As the stream of matter moves around the ovoid towards its destination at the black hole, where it will be reabsorbed into the radiating nucleus and then the absolute, it generates the interference pattern within the cosmic egg, which constitutes the universal hologram or torus. Since the torus is being simultaneously generated by matter in all the various phases of time, it reflects the development of the universe in the past, present, and future, as it would be seen from our particular perspective in one phase of time. Reflects the development. Okay. So it's not saying that it contains all the information from the future. It's saying it reflects the development. Almost like the probabilities. By reflecting on this model, it becomes possible to see how human consciousness brought to a sufficiently altered, quote-unquote, focused state could obtain information concerning the past, present, and future since they all exist in the universal hologram simultaneously. In the case of the future, because all of the consequences of the past and present can be seen coming together in the hologram, such that the future can be predicted or, quote-unquote, seen with total accuracy. Okay. So the past and the present can obviously, like, all that information's there and you can traverse and you can pick that out. And they're saying basically because we have all that information from the past and the present that they can basically predict or see the future with total accuracy. Yeah, that's interesting. But it would be all the future probabilities and they would be able to like realize them one by one and then see, quote unquote, see them as they're realized. Okay. Moreover, it is possible to see how the implosion of energy patterns would cross and recross to create an incredibly complex four-dimensional hologram or torus, in spiral shape and reflection of the multi-dimensional developing pattern of evolution. All of the movements of the energies which comprise the universe leave their mark and hence tell their story throughout time. Number 26, quality of consciousness. We noted earlier that the out-of-body state involves projection of a major portion of the energy pattern that represents human consciousness so that it may move either freely throughout the terrestrial sphere for purposes of information acquisition or into other dimensions outside of time and space, perhaps to interact with other forms of consciousness within the universe. Yeah. So, I mean, they're just saying right there, like, you know, people argue all the time, are there aliens? Is there consciousness outside of Earth? I mean, they're like sitting there like, yeah, there's consciousness all throughout the universe and these intervening dimensions. It's funny, like people at these high levels, they say this stuff so nonchalantly while average Joes are just sitting down here arguing, aliens are real. No, they're not. You're stupid. You're stupid. And meanwhile, like all the people at the highest levels are like, dude, we've known all this and moved past this decades. I mean, ancient cultures and mystics have been talking about this stuff for thousands of years, you know? So anyway, crazy. Consciousness is the organizing and sustaining principle that provides the impetus and guidance to bring and keep energy in motion within a given set of parameters so that a specific reality will result. When consciousness reaches a state of sophistication in which it can perceive itself, its own hologram, it reaches the point of self-cognition. Human beings have this form of elevated consciousness, as does the Absolute, but in case of the latter, it is a function of energy and its associated quality of consciousness and infinity, omniscient and omnipotence in perceptual unity. When energy returns to a state of total rest within the Absolute, it returns to the continuum of consciousness in the pool of limitless, timeless perception that resides there. Thus, the more complex energy system in the material state, the more consciousness it possesses to maintain its reality. Our consciousness, therefore, is that differentiated aspect of the universal consciousness which resides within the Absolute. It accounts for the organization of the energy patterns which constitute our physical body, but is distinctly separate from and superior to it. Since consciousness exists quite apart from and outside of reality, beyond the bounds of time-space, it, like the Absolute, has neither beginning nor end. Reality has both a beginning and an end because it is bounded within time-space. But the fundamental quantum of energy and its associated consciousness is eternal. When reality ends, its constituent, I don't know. When reality ends, its energy simply returns to infinity in the Absolute. When reality ends, its energy simply returns to infinity in the Absolute. All right. Question answered. What happens when all of this comes crashing down or blinks out or whatever? All the energy returns to the Absolute. We all go home. 27. Consciousness and perspective. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences and other dimensions within the universe, and that it is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the Absolute, we are faced with the question, so what happens then? I love it. Let's just answer all the questions. Let's read that sentence again. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality, boom, human consciousness can separate from physical reality. That means our brain does not create consciousness. That means consciousness uses the brain as a receiver. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences in other dimensions within the universe, what is another intelligence, another dimension? That's what we would call interdimensional. That's what we would call spirits or demons or angels or aliens or extraterrestrials or whatever name you want to give them. And they're basically just saying it very nonchalantly here. Yeah, because because consciousness is not confined to the physical body and it's not created by the physical body. It exists in all of these dimensions because it's basically transmitting from the absolute all the way through those dimensions to get to us. So of course it has access to all those dimensions because it comes from the depth. It comes from a dimension that's beyond all of those intervening dimensions. So in all those intervening dimensions are other intelligences that just don't happen to be in physical bodies in a physical reality, but they're just as real. And they're smart, and they're ancient, and they're conscious. We call them aliens because we don't know what the hell we're talking about. I digress. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences and other dimensions within the universe, and that it is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the absolute, we are faced with a question. So what happens then? Since memory is a function of consciousness and therefore enjoys the same eternal character as the consciousness which accounts for its existence, it must be admitted that when consciousness returns to the absolute, it brings with it all of the memories it has accumulated throughout experience in reality. Boom! We did it. No, we didn't do anything. But that answers such a big question because so many people talk about, okay, where is memory? Well, memory is in your brain, dingbat. No, it's not. They've done so many studies where they've disabled parts of people's brains and took rats and took out most of their brain, and they're still able to complete, the little circuits and do all their little tricks and everything. Your memory is not in your brain. You have local memory in your brain, kind of like my computer. I can have an external hard drive, and I have a little flash memory in my computer, right? So I can put everything on my hard drive, and I can wipe out the computer memory, right? But I still have all that stuff on my hard drive. Our memory is not in our brain. Our brain accesses that. It's the database. It's the cosmic database. It's the Akashic record, whatever you want to call it. So our brain is a transducer, and it receives that signal, and it turns it into things, in this case, memories, and it transmits it back to the cloud. So our memory is not in our body. And what they're saying here is that since memory is based on consciousness, so since memory is a function of consciousness, it's a function of consciousness. So it enjoys the same eternal character as consciousness, which means that your memories, all the stuff you do in life, every lifetime you have is building this file folder on the cosmic database, which is you, it's your higher self. That's you. That's your higher self. That's all of your experiences, your hopes, your dreams, every single thing you've ever done in this life and every life you've ever had in this planet and this star system and this universe and all the other ones are stored in a file folder. And that's you. And that, no matter what happens, lives forever because that is a function of consciousness. That's not just, data, and it's not part of our atomic structure. It's separate from all that, okay? It's part of the absolute. So that's super interesting because that's what we're doing here. We're accumulating all of this experience, qualia, that goes back to the absolute, That's what they're saying right here. So really, really fascinating stuff. I mean, that's a question that people have been arguing over philosophically for a very long time. Where are memories stored, and do they survive physical death? And right there, they say they do. And it makes sense because when you're in an out-of-body state, when people are in a near-death experience, they still have, their body can be completely dead, and they still have memories. They still have their identity. They still have awareness and consciousness. So we shouldn't even be arguing about this anymore, but we're in this materialist era right now where our materialist scientists tell us these things and they can't prove it. They don't know. I could, have a cadaver and say, show me where the memories are stored in the brain. And they'll be like, oh, well, this part of the brain, has to do with memory. So the memories are in there, can you open it up and show me the memories? No, it doesn't work that way. Just like when you have a radio, there's a song playing, you can't open up the radio and there's not a little freaking band in there playing music, it's streaming information. Our brain is streaming consciousness that way and this way, up and down. I digress. The return of consciousness to the absolute does not imply an extinction of the separate entity which the consciousness organized and sustained in reality, fancy way of saying body. Rather, it suggests a differentiated consciousness which merges with and participates in the universal consciousness and infinity of the absolute, without losing the separate identity and accumulated self-knowledge which its memories confer upon it. What it does lose is the capability for generation of independent thought holograms, since that can be done only by energy in motion. Okay. So what they're saying is energy in motion is, oh, look, here's a cool picture. So this is more clear. This is our universe. Okay. Our galaxy right here. Okay. So see that? So they're saying this is the universe, and you see the rotation, and that's our galaxy right there. And that we're at the top part. Everything's backwards. We're at the top part here, and we're about to pick away and go in the circle. Anyways, I knew there was a big picture of it somewhere. Okay, sorry. For all those listening, I know that didn't do you any good, but I'll put all this stuff on Patreon in a folder. And so go to my website, DigiJordan, D-I-G-I, Jordan.com, and you can join my Patreon, or just go to Patreon. I think it's under Conscious Observers, and it's like $5 or something. And I try to put stuff from every episode on there. I'm about to really double down on Patreon, so go join it because I'm gonna be doing a lot of stuff on there. But what's so cool about this is that they're saying that essentially what I just said, we're forming a higher self. So every experience we have, every lifetime we have, all that information is accumulating, and it's separate from other people's. So mine's separate from yours. It's like partitioned. It's like a file folder on a cosmic desktop, right? And that's all of our stuff. And then whenever we ultimately like die or whatever, merge back with the absolute, we retain all that, okay? So we still retain that identity. But when you merge back with the absolute, since the absolute is fully at rest, we're no longer projecting or accepting holographic data and information. At that point, you're just at rest. So you can't like create anything new. You can't really act on anything. You're just back in the absolute, back home. So, but you do retain all of that information. You retain your own identity and your memories and all that kind of stuff. Like it's preserved. Okay. Nothing happens to it. Like it says, it retains the power to perceive, but loses the power of will or choice. In exchange, however, this consciousness participates in the all-knowing infinite continuum of consciousness, which is a characteristic of energy in the ever-present. Consequently, it is accurate to observe that when a person experiences the out-of-body state, he is, in fact, projecting that eternal spark of consciousness and memory which constitutes the ultimate source of his identity to let it play in and learn from dimensions both inside and outside the time-space world in which this physical component currently enjoys a short period of reality. Yeah, so like saying the out-of-body state is sort of like playing around with what it'll be like when you no longer come into the physical, when you're just pure conscious energy and you don't have any sort of a physical identity or restraints or anything. But it is interesting that they do go into depth and tell you that your separate identity stays intact, even whenever you do merge and reunite with the absolute, but that you lose the ability of like action, because everything in the absolute is at rest. So that's why we come out here into this physical universe, is to play, to express ourselves, to learn and to grow and evolve and have all these experiences and do all this stuff. Because once you merge back and once you're back in the absolute, you know, you don't do that stuff. You can't do that stuff because it's purely at rest. If you could do that stuff, then it wouldn't be the absolute. The absolute is pure rest, no movement, you know? So that's why we come here. That's why we're here. This is like the playground, okay? This is where conscious energy goes to express itself and to play and to have experiences. That is the point. Because when you're back in the absolute, you don't do those things. 28, the gateway method. Having put the gateway experience in context by postulating a structural outline of how and why it seems to work, and having shown what it is designed to achieve, the time has come to examine the specific techniques which comprise the gateway training process. These techniques are designed to enable the user of the gateway tapes to manipulate the high energy states which can be achieved if the user continues to work with the tapes over a period of time. The amount of time required to reach advanced energy states and to fully exploit the techniques varies within the individual. The sensitivity of his nervous system, his general state of mind, and the extent to which he may have previously developed faculty in related techniques such as transcendental meditation are all pertinent factors affecting the speed at which he may expect to progress. The gateway process begins by teaching the individual participant to isolate extraneous. That's a fun word. To isolate extraneous concerns in a visualization device called an energy conversion box. If y'all have ever done the gateway tapes, you know about the energy conversion box. Essentially, you visualize this box. It's really heavy, a big, heavy lid. You take the lid off and you put your fears, your worries, your anxieties, that kind of stuff in it, and then you close the lid, and it converts that energy into like positive, constructive energy. You do that basically at the beginning of every exercise. Next, the participant is introduced to a method of encouraging his mind and body to strive to achieve a state of resonance through utterance of a single tone, a monotonous, protracted humming sound that sets up a feeling of vibration, particularly in the head. He engages in this resonant tuning, as it is called, by humming along with the chorus of such sounds that are contained on the gateway tape. It's a bunch of like Buddhist monks that are humming, and it's really cool. And when you do it, you're and it's like you're doing it with them, and your body starts to like vibrate. And basically, it gets like a tuning fork. It gets your whole body in resonance, right? So that as you're humming and that vibration is going through your whole body, it gives you chills, and it starts to align. Even your toes will be, like at the same resonant frequency as like your hair, because everything is humming along at the same tone. It's really cool, and it works. And I know that a lot of people, they're self-conscious about the humming part. So a lot of people will skip that, when they're doing the meditation and everything, but don't skip it. It is a big catalyst for the rest of the stuff. Following this, the participant is exposed to the gateway affirmation and is encouraged to repeat it to himself as he hears it repeated on the tape. This affirmation is a statement to the effect that the individual realizes that he is more than merely a physical body and that he deeply desires to expand his consciousness. It's great. Robert Monroe told a story in one of his books that when they were exploring the out-of-body state and the astral state, and he had his team of elite explorers called the Explorer Team, and he would guide them. Tom Campbell was one of them, a bunch of people were, and he would guide them through the astral states. And they were able to like out-of-body astrally explore all these different planets and dimensions and do all sorts of crazy, crazy stuff. But they didn't ever see any other entities. They didn't see any other intelligences or anything like that. And he didn't know why. He was like, there has to be intelligence out here. There has to be other consciousnesses. And when he created this whatever you call it, this affirmation that you say, he said as soon as they started saying that they started having all of these face-to-face encounters and experiences with non-human intelligences, other consciousnesses and intelligences and other dimensions. So it's really interesting that the way that he constructed this affirmation really works wonders for that. So if you're ever out there exploring and it's kind of quiet, do the affirmation. It's almost like it's turning on your open sign, for other intelligences. Hemisync introduced. That's number 29. So that's a short one. After that, he is exposed for the first time to the hemisync sound frequencies and is encouraged to focus on and develop a perception of and appreciation for those feelings which accompany the synchronization of brainwaves that results. Next comes a technique of progressive and systematic physical relaxation while the hemisync frequencies are expanded to include additional forms of pink and white noise designed to put the physical body at the virtual threshold of sleep, as well as to calm the left hemisphere of the mind while raising the right hemisphere to a state of heightened attentiveness. Once all of this is achieved, the participant is invited to envisage creation of an energy balloon comprised of an energy flow beginning at the center of the top of the head and extending down in all directions to the feet. The energy involved in this flow then proceeds up through the body and back out onto the balloon pattern again. This energy balloon, which sets up a pattern very reminiscent of the cosmic egg discussed earlier, not only enhances bodily energy flow and encourages early achievement of a suitable resonant state, but it is also designed to provide protection against conscious entities possessing lower energy levels, which the participant might encounter in the event that he achieves an out-of-body state. Very scientific way to say you create this energy balloon around you, this resonant ball, and it protects you. Okay, so it is a Kundalini type of exercise that you do with the breathing and the visualization where you're moving energy up and around. So it does activate your chakras, and it does definitely get energy flowing and moving around you. But most importantly, and this is very important because the Monroans too, they take protection very seriously because it's like running into a jungle, right? Jungles are beautiful, right? There's a lot of really nice things there, but there's also a lot of really crazy shit that wants to kill you. When you go out into the cosmos in these intervening dimensions, not that there's bad things necessarily, but there's definitely entities, energies, consciousnesses that might be at a lower vibrational state than you. They might be scared of you. They might have no idea who the heck you are and why you're in their place, so you just never know what you're going to encounter. So it makes a lot of sense to protect yourself. And this reball, what they call it, the reball, the resonant energy ball, this balloon that they're describing here, it's a part of every single exercise that we would do because you have to protect yourself. It's like putting on a seatbelt when you get in your car. You do this first. It's very important because you'd rather have it, not need it, than be out there somewhere and need it and not have it. Continuing on about the reball, it serves a precautionary purpose in the unlikely event that the participant's first out-of-body experience involves direct projection outside the terrestrial sphere. So basically saying, hey, if you have beginner's luck and you're able to nail an out-of-body experience and go outside of space and time, you're probably going to want to protect yourself a little bit. So, next section, number 30, advanced techniques. Having reached focus 10, the participant is now ready to endeavor to achieve this is all, that's so awesome. This is all like focus 10 and below. And we have not even scratched the surface, guys. So hopefully y'all are well hydrated and rested because it's about to get really good. Advanced techniques. That was all beginner stuff, y'all. Having reached focus 10, the participant is now ready to endeavor to achieve a state of sufficiently expanded awareness to begin actually interacting with dimensions beyond those associated with his experience of physical reality. This state is called focus 12 and involves conscious efforts on his part while additional forms of pink and white noise enter the sound stream being directed into his ears from the gateway tape. Once a participant has achieved this state of greatly expanded awareness, he is ready to begin employing a series of specific techniques or tools, as Monroe Institute characterizes them, which enable him to manipulate his newly found expanded awareness to obtain practical, useful feedback of value for promoting self-discovery and personal growth. The specific techniques involved are described individually below. So these are just some of the things that you can do once you get into this state of expanded awareness, which is in focus 12. A, problem solving. This technique involves identifying fundamental problems which the individual wishes to see solved. I don't even know why we need to go into this, but I'll go ahead and finish reading it. We all know what problem solving is. I'm sure you can figure it out. But filling his expanded awareness with his perception of these problems and then projecting them out into the universe. In this way, the individual enlists the assistance of what Oh, okay. Actually, this is cool. Sorry. Of what Monroe Institute calls higher self. So people think of higher self as like some hippy-dippy woo-woo stuff, but this is back in 1983, okay? And Robert Monroe is not some new age guy, you know what I mean? He was a sound executive and sound engineer, very, very well off, grew up on a farm and was a very engineering-minded, analytical person. Definitely not woo, definitely not into like spirituality and that kind of stuff. And he's talking about the higher self and he calls it the higher self. When I went there, I had an amazingly wild, kind of scary experience with my higher self. I did a whole video on it. So it's a thing. It's a real thing. So in this way, the individual enlists the assistance of what Robert Monroe calls the higher self, in other words, his expanded consciousness, to interact with the universal hologram to obtain the information required to solve the problem. This approach may be used to solve personal difficulties, technical problems in the realm of physics, mathematics, etc., practical administrative problems, and so on. Responses to the problem-solving technique may be received almost immediately, but often they come based on developing intuition over the next 2 or 3 days. Frequently, the responses come in the form of a sudden holistic perception in which the individual suddenly finds that he simply knows the answer in all of its ramifications and completely in context, sometimes without even being able to put his newly found perception into words, at least initially. In some cases, the response may even arrive in the form of visual symbols, which the individual will see with his mind while he is in the Focus 12 state, and which he will have to interpret after he returns to normal consciousness. So what this means is that you can go into the state of expanded awareness, and you can present say you have a problem in your life, some obstacle, maybe it's a health problem, maybe, who knows, whatever's going on in your life. And you can put that question out there. I do this all the freaking time. It's actually in my manifestation course. I teach you how to do this. I walk you through the whole thing. And it's based a lot on this. And you can put that question out there. I oftentimes do it at sleep. Right before I go to bed, say I have a problem or I have a question that I want answered. I'll give the assignment to my subconscious, which in this case is your higher self. And you'll just say, okay, in my sleep tonight, I need the solution or the answer to this question. Then you go to sleep, and then in the morning when you wake up, you recall. So immediately when you wake up, you say, what was the answer to that question or what was the solution to my problem? And you just wait to see what pops in your head. Sometimes, like they said, it pops in immediately. Sometimes it's just a knowing, like a download. You're just like, aha, I got it. Sometimes it'll come like they said over the next couple of days through like some sort of a weird synchronicity. Like maybe you have some sort of a health problem and you're trying to get the answer to it. You're like, oh, why do I have restless legs, right? And you go to sleep and you say to your subconscious, tonight in my sleep, please deliver me the answer that I need to, calm my restless legs. Just throwing stuff out there, and and then say to yourself, and give me the answer in the morning when I wake up. And then you wake up in the morning and you think about it. Okay, what was the answer? Why do I have restless legs? And you don't get the answer. Sometimes you get it. It's just a download. And you're like, boom, now I know. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And you're like, okay, well, I didn't get it. You go on with your day. And then halfway through your day, somebody walks up to you and they're just like, oh, I was watching this documentary last night and it was talking all about this. And they were talking about restless legs. Have you ever heard of that? They said you can do this to fix it. You'll be like, oh my God, I was just talking, you know what I mean? So I'm sure you've had those kind of synchronistic type things before. That's your higher self delivering the information to you in a roundabout way. Einstein famously said that synchronicity is the universe's way of maintaining anonymity, basically saying that, it's giving you the answers without giving up the game. You know what I mean? It still wants to maintain anonymity. It's still, your higher self wants you to think that you're in this game and that you're all alone and you're on your own and you're figuring things out on your own. It's kind of like a kid in school. Like you don't want to give them the answers to the test, but sometimes if you see they're struggling, you'll kind of drop a few clues in there. That's what your higher self's doing. It's dropping some clues in. It's answering the question, but it has to do it in a way to where it maintains anonymity. And that's what these synchronicities are. So that's what they're talking about there. Next one is one of my favorites. I made a whole course on this. Well, not on just this, but this is kind of the centerpiece of it. It's called patterning. Patterning is the Monroe Institute way to explain manifestation. Essentially, you are manifesting. You're creating physical matter reality, or you're altering physical matter reality. You don't always have to manifest physical things. It can be emotions. It can be feelings. It can be, opportunities. It can be all sorts of things. But you are affecting physical matter reality with your thoughts. Here's how it works. Patterning. This technique involves use of the consciousness to achieve desired objectives in the physical, emotional, or intellectual sphere. It involves concentration on the desired objective while in a focus 12 state, extension of the individual's perception of that objective into the whole expanded consciousness, and its projection into the universe with the intention that the desired objective is already a matter of established achievement, which is destined to be realized within the time frame specified. This particular methodology is based on the belief that the thought patterns generated by our consciousness in a state of expanded awareness create holograms, which represent the situation we desire to bring about, and, in doing so, establish the basis for actual realization of that goal. Once the thought-generated hologram of the sought-after objective is established in the universe, it becomes an aspect of reality which interacts with the universal hologram to bring about the desired objective, which might not, under other circumstances, ever occur. In other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in time-space as it applies to us, if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. However, the more complicated the objective sought and the more radically it departs from our current reality, the more time the universal hologram will need to reorient our reality sphere to accommodate our desires. Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with dramatic consequences. Basically saying, don't try to force your manifestations too fast, and don't try to manifest unrealistically big things or things that depart from your current reality in like very extreme ways, because everything, there's a cause and effect in this physical matter reality. So if you manifest something, like say you manifest $1 billion and you're able to pull it off, that is going to significantly disrupt your current reality. And it might have very negative consequences that you're not thinking about. So it doesn't mean don't think big and try to do big things. It just means think through it. Like make sure that the thing you're trying to manifest falls in line with your current life trajectory, with your purpose in this lifetime. And you think through some of these butterfly effects that it could have. Because, there's a line in here. I'm going to reread it because it's incredibly powerful. In other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in time-space as it applies to us, if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. So if you with adequate intensity. Remember we talked earlier about lamp versus laser. Laser focused thought and clarity. You can project that into the universal hologram and you can create, you can print. I have a course called 5D Print Your Reality, and the whole point of it is you are printing with your mind. I walk you through every single step of this really neat process that involves physics, metaphysics, spirituality, woo-woo, quantum physics, simulation theory, all sorts of things wrapped up with all of the things that we've talked about in this. I mean, I used everything from my Monroe Institute experience, from all my personal experience, and from this book here. Everything goes into this course about manifestation. It's called 5D Print Your Reality. It's a lot of fun. And what it teaches you is that when you turn your lamp into a laser, you can project out and create your own hologram. And when you do that with enough intensity and focused attention, you can put that into our reality. It doesn't just manifest right in front of your face, because if you picture it like you're playing those old side scroller games like Mario, you can only see what's in your frame of reference, right? What's in your little box. But there's things on that level that are further down the level, and they exist. They're there, but you just can't see them yet because they're not in your frame. So that's how manifestation works. You're creating it. It's being printed, okay? 5D printed. You know how those 3D printers are real slow? So imagine that. It's printing and it's slow. So you have to keep the same, manifestation. You can't be bouncing back and forth between different things, and you can't get frustrated and be like, oh, it's not going to happen, so I'm going to jump to something else, because it's printing. It's printing into reality. It's just you haven't got there yet. So it's just like those side-scroller video games. You have to keep playing, keep going down, and eventually you'll get to that part of the level, and then you'll see it, and you'll be like, there it is. That's how it is in real life too. And that's what they're telling us here with patterning. Patterning is how you manifest in real life by just using, focused, laser-focused intention. But you have to be in the state of expanded awareness. So in my course, I put you in, it's a guided meditation. I get you in the state. I use binaural beats just like this. It's really cool. Check it out. Anyways, that's patterning. Patterning is crazy. I mean, I healed my body. I patterned so many things. I had so many things that should not have existed, should not have happened, that me and my wife like literally used these techniques and created things that, like it even says that, I love this line here. Once the thought-generated hologram of the sought-after objective is established in the universe, it becomes an aspect of reality, right? Which interacts with the universal hologram to bring about the desired objective, which might not, under other circumstances, ever occur. They're saying this thing now is here. It's in reality. It's a part of reality, and it, under other circumstances, would not have occurred. You did it. You created it. It's amazing. It's amazing. This is all very real. Color breathing, C. I use this too for healing my body, especially the next one, energy bar tool. Whew, that's the fun stuff. Color breathing. The next technique is called color breathing and is designed to use the expanded awareness and highly focused attentiveness associated with the Focus 12 state to imagine various colors in a particularly intense and vivid manner so as to use them to resonate with and in turn to activate the body's own energies. Fundamentally, in terms of practical application, it is a healing technique which is designed to restore the body and to enhance its physical capabilities by balancing, revitalizing, and retuning bodily energy flows. It is predicated on the principle that the body's electromagnetic field is capable of altering its resonance pattern so as to entrain energy from the Earth's electrostatic field for its own use. The various colors envisioned in the imagination as part of the technique cue the mind as to which frequencies and what specific amplitudes are desired in connection with the entrainment and subsequent alterations in bodily energy flow patterns. That color has the capacity to affect the human mind is well known. That color has the capacity to affect the human mind is well known. And the effectuality of color in certain kinds of healing is a demonstrable fact. For example, application of an intense blue light to an area of physical luminescence. They call it tumescence. Tumescence? Is that a word? A physical tumescence. Leads to a relatively rapid and easily observable reduction in the swelling, while red, and to a lesser extent yellow, have quite the opposite effect. However, in the hemisync application of the technique, external light sources are not involved, but rather the mind is the sole agent of the healing and revitalization. So basically what they're saying is that since light and color are just different wavelengths of energy, that just by thinking, since everything is just energy, right? Everything's kind of virtual in a sense. By just thinking of a color, you're projecting that same wave as the actual color. So if I shone a blue light on you, but then I also just think about a blue light on you, I'm projecting those same wavelengths as the light would be. That's the theory here. And that different lights have a demonstrably different effect on the physical body. Like we know this. I have a sauna and I have this light bulb in the sauna that changes colors. And depending on the color, like green is relaxing and purple is healing and stuff like that. Depending on the color, it has different effects on you. So you can be in the sauna and you can put on a different color. Like say I put on red or orange, it's going to make me more, energetic and give me more energy. Whereas like green makes me more calm. So we know that. So what they're saying is you can use your mind and you can like project colors on you to do different healing and like reduce inflammation and that kind of stuff in your body. Super interesting, huh? Energy bar tool is one of my favorites here. Once you master the energy bar tool, you can do so many things. Like you can time travel, you can remote view. The energy bar tool is it's freaking crazy. Check this out. Magic wands and enchanted scepters. Scepters? Scepters. Is that like a wand? I think so. Well, no, they say magic wands. What is an enchanted scepter? Probably those cool, like Merlin would hold. Magic wands and enchanted scepters have been part of the folklore and occult practices of many cultures. The scepters, staffs, and maces carried by monarchs and high priests alike occur with such frequency in the history of the bygone eras as to suggest that, at the very least, these items are aspects of some type of archetypal symbol which the human mind seems to appreciate, perhaps quite subliminally. In any case, the energy bar tool technique involves they don't say envisioning. It says envisaging. It's weird. It's not envisioning. It's a different word. I'll just say envisioning. Envisioning a small, intensely pulsating dot of light with which the participant charges in his imagination with enormous energy until it is virtually pulsating. The participant then extrudes the dot into the shape of a sparkling, vibrating cylinder of energy, which he then uses to channel force from the universe to selected parts of his body for purposes of healing and revitalization. Okay, here's how it works. I use this all the time. I had crazy pancreatitis. On pain level 1 to 10, I was at a 10 for over a year. It was freaking nuts. Ended up almost dying, near-death experience, hospitalized, all that stuff. After I got out, I had heart problems, liver problems, pancreas, all the problems, all these things. Basically from here to down there, was all jacked up. And I found all this years ago. This is in 2020, and I started doing these things. And the way the energy bar tool works is freaking amazing. So what you do in a meditative state, in the state of expanded awareness, you imagine in front of you this ball of light, just an orb of light. Now that light is your perception. They don't tell you this in here, but that light is your awareness, okay? So your awareness right now is in your body. Like you're looking out of your eyes, that's your awareness, okay? Like a VR headset. What you kind of do is you kind of pull that awareness in front of you and you bring your awareness to this ball of light and you focus your intention on it and you watch that ball of light become brighter and more intense and more powerful to the point where it's pulsating. It's just like this sparkling, pulsating ball of light and like a little miniature sun just right in front of you. Now that is your focused awareness. So when people say your focused awareness, that's what it is. It's that light. Now that you have it like that, you grab one end of it and imagine just pulling it out like a magic wand, right? You're pulling it out. Now, instead of it being a ball of light, it's like this cylinder of light. And you put one end of the cylinder wherever your issue is. For me, it was a pancreas, so it was right in the center of my body. I put one end of there. And then the other end, you imagine like healing energy from the universe pouring into it like a funnel and going into and healing your pancreas. And you can even imagine it being different colors by using the color breathing. That's what I did. And you can heal certain parts of your body very precisely by doing that. And it's called the energy bar tool. And we use this method to do all sorts of different things, like remote viewing. In addition, the energy bar tool is used as a portal for initiating a follow-on technique called remote viewing. In this context, the participant turns his bar of energy into a whirling vortex through which he sends his imagination in search of new and illuminating insights. The apparent purpose of the symbolism involved in the vortex seems to be to cue the subconscious and convey to it instructions as to what the participant wishes to do, but in terms of nonverbal symbols, which the right hemisphere of the mind is capable of understanding. So essentially what they're saying is when you have this energy bar tool and you've gone through the process, you have your focused awareness in front of you, and now it's this energy bar tool. They don't teach you this at the Monroe Institute. I learned remote viewing from Joe McMonagle at the Monroe Institute, and we never did this. So we'll skip over this part because I will say here's one way to use the energy bar tool. This is how I've played around with it personally to do. I wouldn't even call this remote viewing, but I guess it fits in that category. It's really cool, and anyone can do it. So when you have that energy bar tool, instead of you have your focused awareness, that ball, that orb of light in front of you is pulsating, and you pull it to a cylinder. And before you would put one end on whatever organ or whatever part of your body you want to heal. Now imagine it it doesn't even really matter where this end is. It can be on your head. It can be whatever. You can just be holding it, or it can just be sitting in front of you. But the other end, imagine it being like this tube, this tunnel, and it goes to wherever. So you can put the other end of it, say you wanted to remote view a place. You could put the other end of it there, and then imagine your awareness going through that tunnel from one side to the other, and on the other side is the place you want to remote view. Or imagine it's a person and you want to send them a telepathic message. On the other side of that tube is the person, and you're sending them a message, and it goes your awareness and your consciousness, and that message goes through that tunnel. So whatever's on the other side of that tunnel is you're making this connection, through time space. You're kind of quantumly entangling it at that point. But that's another way to use the energy bar tool. The living body map, F. This technique provides amplification for application of the energy bar tool as a means of healing specific areas or systems of the human body. The configuration of the participant's body is imagined, and then the various major systems, such as the nervous, circulatory systems, are envisaged. What is this word? Maybe I'm just ignorant. Envisaged in appropriate colors within the confines of the outline being held in the imagination. Essentially saying, separate certain systems in your body. So you're creating a body map. So imagine your body's laying there and you're looking at it from bird's eye view, and imagine you're having a problem with your heart, your circulation, your circulatory system. You would imagine that system being in red, and then maybe your respiratory system's in purple, and you know what I mean? You can kind of, it's called a living body map. And then you're isolating those particular systems so that you can work on them at a kind of a consciousness level. Okay. The energy bar tool is then applied to energizing, balancing, and healing in whatever manner the participant desires. In the process, the participant visualizes various streams of colored energy flowing out of the tool into the organ system or area upon which the revitalization or healing application is being made. Since colors are the result of differing wavelengths of light, which is to say energy at various frequencies, this technique operates on the assumption that as the human body is composed of energy, it can be vitalized and healed through the additive application of additional energy, provided that the energy is applied in the appropriate form. Essentially what I was talking about before, that we know color has an effect on the body. So what we're doing is we're coloring our thoughts essentially with the same wavelength to have that same physiological effect. It's pretty fascinating when you think about it. Focus 15, travel into the past. All of the preceding techniques are conducted at the level of expanded awareness known as Focus 12. However, the technique of time travel into the past involves further expansion of consciousness through the inclusion of additional levels of sound on the hemisync tapes. Some of the sound is probably merely an intensification of the basic hemisync frequencies being designed to further modify brainwave frequency and amplitude. Other aspects of the added sound patterns appear to be designed to provide subtle, almost subliminal suggestions to the mind as to what is desired by way of further expanded consciousness, so as to support the verbal suggestions and instructions also contained on the tape. Even the instructions are highly symbolic, with time being visualized as a huge wheel in the universe with various spokes, each of which gives access to different part of the participant's past. Focus 15 is a very advanced state and is extremely difficult to achieve. Probably less than 5% of all participants in any given gateway experience actually fully achieves the Focus 15 state during the course of the approximately 7 days of training. Nonetheless, Monroe Institute trainers affirm that with enough practice, eventually Focus 15 can be achieved. They also state that not only the individual's past history is available for examination by one who has achieved Focus 15, but other aspects of the past with which the individual himself has had no connection may also be accessed. So saying you can access your past, or you can also just access the past. Now, when I was at the Monroe Institute, 15 was just called the state of no time or something like that. We didn't time travel. You go into this, it's almost like a void in a sense, because time doesn't really exist. So this is really interesting because we also didn't do this wheel. So what they're saying is that you visualize this big wheel, kind of like a wagon wheel, and like you're in the middle, right? That's where you are now. And each spoke that goes out is like a different timeline or a different lifeline. And that, say you wanted to go, I don't know, to your childhood, you can envision one of the spokes being, okay, I'm going to go to 5-year-old me. And you use your focus awareness, which is still that just ball of light in front of you. And you're just going to go down that spoke. So it's kind of like all the spokes lead back to the center hub, which is you now. And you have access to all these past lives and past timelines. So that's actually a really cool visual metaphor, but we didn't do that, but this is 40 something years ago. So a lot's changed. But Focus 15, I don't remember being particularly difficult to like master or anything, but we also didn't time travel in that way. We went and just floated in the void. Anyways, Focus 21, the future. See, we didn't call Focus 21 the future either. It was called the bridge, I believe. It's kind of the bridge between physical matter reality and non-physical. It's where you go. We went there to talk to like past loved ones. That's where they kind of come. It's the bridge, so they can come meet you there. You can go, like there's other focus levels. I mean, it keeps going really high, and there's crazy ones. 21 is kind of the last one you do, I believe, at Gateway Voyage, because after that you get into the totally non-physical realms, and it gets really wild. But 21 is like the bridge where the non-physical can meet you there. So you're still in the physical, but you can converse with the ones in non-physical. I had a crazy experience there. I did a video on it. I met my star family. Like I went to meet spirits of my past loved ones, and I was sort of intercepted by beings that told me, intelligences that told me that they were my star family, and that essentially I had, not that I'd shed my human family, but there was a certain point in this life when my human family would kind of fall off, which it has, and that I would be reunited with my star family, and then I had some wild dreams and visions and stuff after about blue beings and stuff. It was really interesting, but it was like very, very, when you're in the state, especially at the bridge, it's, you get that feeling where you're like, I'm in this reality and they're in a different reality, and we're sort of like on different sides of the glass talking, and it's wild, obviously. The future, Focus 21. The last and most advanced of all the focus states associated with the Gateway training program involves movement outside of the boundaries of time-space, as in Focus 15, but with attention to discovering the future rather than the past. The individual who has achieved this state has reached a truly advanced level, except in unusual circumstances. It is probably not attainable except by those who have conditioned themselves through long application of meditation, or by those who have practiced long and hard through the use of hemisync tapes for a period of months, if not years. So, yeah, they're saying Focus 21, you can go to the future, which would be the probable futures, because the definite future hasn't happened. The futures is like a probability distribution field. It's like possibilities with probabilities assigned to them. So you can visit those probable futures. But we didn't do that. So when you go to the Monroe Institute, Focus 21 is the bridge. And I guess you can go to the future, but that's not what we were trained to do. We were communicating with essentially consciousnesses and spirits that were on the other side. 31. Out-of-body movement. This remarkable phenomenon has been saved for discussion in detail until last because of the interest which it occasions and special circumstances involved in its attainment. Monroe Institute stresses that the Gateway program was not established solely for the purpose of enabling participants to obtain the out-of-body state, nor does the program guarantee that most participants will succeed in doing it during the course of the training at the Institute. Only one tape out of the many which make up the Gateway experience is devoted to the techniques involved in the out-of-body movement. Basically, these techniques are merely designed to make it easier for the individual to achieve the out-of-body state when his brainwave pattern and personal energy levels have reached a point that he is in apparent harmony with his surrounding electromagnetic environment, such that he feels that he has reached a threshold where separation is a possibility. That's really interesting because we talked in the first part, the first video, that when you're getting into this kind of hemi-sync state of expanded awareness, that your body's like a tuning fork. So you get in tune. Your whole body gets in this resonant tuning. But then you also, at a certain point, tune to your environment. You tune to the ionosphere, this ionospheric cavity that they talk about. And that's super interesting. And at a certain point, you can tune to the magnetosphere, and you can actually become in tune with all of Gaia, with all of Earth. And that's super duper fascinating. What they're saying here is that it's easier to leave your body if you're in tune with your environment, because then your consciousness is in tune, not just with your body, it's in tune with its environment. So it's easier to switch over because it's already in tune with it. So that's an important part. Yeah. I don't remember them telling us that at the Institute, but that's super interesting. That makes sense in my head. If you want your consciousness to leave your body, it doesn't want to be like a fish out of water. So it needs to be in tune with its surroundings first so that it can slip out easily. I think that's probably why it fights. It's like a fight. When you're trying to leave your body, your consciousness fights. I describe it as like peeling it like Velcro. You know, Velcro sometimes is kind of tough and you kind of have to yank on it. That's what it feels like. Your consciousness does not want to leave your body. Well, it might want to. Your body doesn't want it to. It's got it in there pretty good. It's got a lid on it. So, where were we? To facilitate achieving the out-of-body state, Bob Monroe, the founder of Monroe Institute, is quoted in a recent magazine article as saying that in order to assist the participant, the particular hemisync tape concerned with that technique employs beta signals of around 2877.3 CPS, that's cycles per second. Since 30 to 40 CPS is considered to be the normal range for beta brainwave signals, those associated with the wakeful state, it is apparent that the Monroe Institute is convinced that the same heightened state of brainwave frequency output, which promotes altered states of consciousness, is also an important consideration in assisting in achievement of out-of-body states. The actual techniques employed for separating from the body involve such simple maneuvers as rolling out, lifting out after the fashion of a telephone pole, wherein the individual separates in a rigid head-first manner, such that he finds himself standing at attention to the foot of his physical body, and sliding out through either end of his body. There's different techniques, like there's the rollout, where you say you're laying on your back and you just imagine your consciousness rolling out. There's the rake method, where like you literally imagine someone like stepping on your feet and your consciousness shoots out. For people that can't do it slow, they want to do it all in one fell swoop like that. There's the rope method, where you literally are laying on your back and this is the one I use. You imagine that your consciousness, so your hands are still, your hands are down at your side, but you imagine that your consciousness, like your ethereal body, your energy body, grabs this rope above you, pulls and pulls and pulls, and with every pull, your consciousness is coming out of your body. That one works. There's all sorts of different methods, but it's just these little tricks. It's like mental hacks, to doing it. It's all mental. 32, role of REM sleep. It is interesting to note that Bob Monroe informed the Gateway class that finished 7th May 1983 that an ex-trainer of his operating in Charlottesville, Virginia, found that he could guarantee out-of-body movements by bringing participants down into a rapid eye movement, REM, state of sleep, and then use the hemisync tape technique. This may well be a function of the fact that most, if not all, people reputedly go into an out-of-body state during REM sleep. So what they're saying is one of the people that graduated from Monroe Institute went on to perform some experiments where he would take people into this REM state and then do the hemisync tapes, and they were able to basically guarantee out-of-body travel. REM sleep is the deepest possible level of ordinary sleep and involves complete disengagement of the body's motor cortex functions from the neck down and nearly complete suppression of consciousness in the left brain hemisphere. The effect of this is to put the body in a state of complete stillness so far as the skeletal muscle structure is concerned, thereby further promoting the state of deep rest needed to eliminate the bifurcation echo. In addition, it leaves the right hemisphere of the brain free to respond to the instructions and suggestions contained on the Gateway tape. However, use of the hemisync tapes at this point may be less a factor in actually achieving the out-of-body state than it is a matter of focusing the brain enough so that a residual memory of having naturally achieved an out-of-body state is carried into the waking state. Indeed, it may even be postulated that some dreams associated with the deep levels of sleep are in fact functions of the same kind of altered consciousness involved in interaction with the universe that plays a role in all of the focus 12, 15, and 21 states described above. Basically saying your dreams, that's crazy. They're basically saying that your dreams could just be memories of your consciousness having these altered state experiences, like these focus 12, 15, and 21 states, visiting the past, visiting the future, traveling different dimensions and all that kind of stuff, that what you're doing here, these out-of-body states, that's what dreams are. Your dreams are just you remembering these out-of-body experiences. That's crazy. I never pondered that before. The difference between those states and the condition of the mind in REM sleep seems to be that the left hemisphere is almost totally disengaged in the latter experience, such that memory of what was achieved in the altered states of consciousness cannot usually be retrieved by conscious desire because the left hemisphere has no knowledge of its existence or its location in the right hemisphere. So what they're saying is, when you're conscious, when you're awake, and you're purposely doing an out-of-body travel, and you go wherever, like you time travel, you go to different dimensions, you have these experiences, since you're conscious and you're awake, your left brain is still engaged. So it's processing and thinking and remembering, and it kind of is trying to establish where you are in space and time and that kind of stuff. So when you come back, you have full memory of all this. But whenever you're in REM sleep, you're having those same experiences. You're still in this like focus 12, 15, 21 state, and you're having this out-of-body experience. But the difference is your left brain is asleep, and the left brain is the logical processing center. So whenever you come to in the morning, you don't remember any of this. You just remember little flashes and stuff. So they're basically saying that that's what dreams are. Dreams are you just having out-of-body experiences every night, and you don't remember it because your left brain is asleep and disengaged. I've never ever thought of that. That's freaking nuts. In any event, the three apparent conditions required for voluntarily inducing an out-of-body state in most individuals seems to be achievement of a state of profound quiet in the body such that the bifurcation echo fades and resonance at approximately 7 hertz is established. Number 2, synchronization of the two brain hemispheres, wave patterns. 3, subsequent stimulation of the right hemisphere of the mind to attain a state of heightened alert, which of course interferes with brain hemispheric synchronization, but not until a sufficient level of enhanced frequency range has first been established to help achieve the out-of-body state. What? Subsequent stimulation of the right hemisphere of the brain. Okay. Anyways, let's go on. Number 33. Information collection potential. Yeah. The information acquisition potential associated with an out-of-body state seems to attract the most attention from the standpoint of developing practical applications for the gateway technique. Essentially what he's saying is this is what the Army really wants. All this other stuff is fun, but what the Army wants is information collection. They want espionage. They want to spy. They want to see what their adversaries are up to. The information acquisition potential associated with the out-of-body state seems to attract the most attention from the standpoint. Okay. Unfortunately, although the out-of-body state can apparently be achieved by many people without excessive expenditure of time or effort, the purpose to which it can be put are currently limited. The purposes to which it can be put are currently limited by the fact that although individuals in that state may travel anywhere on an instantaneous basis in either the terrestrial or in other spheres, information distortion in the former context remains a major concern. So they're saying that they can travel, you can remote view, you can out of body, you can astral travel, you can time travel, you can do all this stuff. But when you bring back that data, when you bring back that information, there's a level of distortion. There's a level of disruption to that information that maybe it's not reliable. That's interesting. To date, according to one of the trainers at Monroe Institute, numerous experiments have been conducted involving persons moving from one coast to the other in the out-of-body state to read a series of 10 computer-generated numbers in a university laboratory. Although most have acquired enough of the digits to make clear that their consciousness was present, none have ever succeeded in getting all 10 correct. This seems to be a function of the fact that physical reality in the present is not the only holographic influence which the individual may encounter in an out-of-body state. There are also energy patterns left by people or events occurring at the same physical site being viewed, but from the past rather than the present. So it's like you're going there consciously, not physically. In this case, they had people on one coast try to basically remote view some numbers on a screen on the other coast. And they got them right to the extent to where the people doing the experiment knew that they were consciously there. They saw the screens, they recorded the numbers, but they could never get every single one of them right because there's disturbances, there's interference, there's other energy patterns that are there that's residual from like all the things that have ever happened in that place over time that you're kind of murkies it, muddies the energy a little bit. But how cool is that they could remote view and they could see the numbers on the screen, but they can never get every single one of them. Also, there's an interesting story that Tom Campbell tells about, when they first started getting into all this stuff and like Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff and those guys, they were like remote viewing silver's futures to make money, and they said that basically they got to a point where it wasn't working anymore. There was diminishing returns, and they thought that it was like a conscious thing that like maybe because they were using this ability in a way that was kind of for service to self, that it became less effective. Tom Campbell also tells a story where one of his people was remote viewing the lottery and got every single number right. So when people always say, hey, dude, if you can remote view, why are you not a billionaire? Why don't you win the lottery? Check out this story. They got every single number right across the board, but every number was off by one. What are the odds of that? I mean, that's statistically impossible. So what it proves is that it's almost like the universe or the higher self, whoever was in charge of this, saying, not quite, buddy. We're not going to let you do this. But we're going to let you get close enough to where you know that you did it. But you also know that we know. You know what I mean? So there is something about the whole using this stuff for good. Like remote viewers that find missing kids. There's a lot of police departments around the world that still employ remote viewers to find missing kids and things like that. And they have a very, very high success rate when they're doing that. But when someone's trying to find like a sunken treasure chest or something like that, they have a very low success rate. So usually if it's something that has a positive outcome, you have a higher chance of success. So in this case, they were trying to do this remote viewing stuff to like weaponize it. And it's almost like it makes you wonder if like that's why it wasn't more successful. Because we know remote viewing is a thing and we know that it works and we know that you can do this stuff. But the government poured all this money into it and did it for decades, and the results were so mixed and they were so frustrated because like, we know it works. Why can we not use this to like read confidential files in Russia's file cabinets and stuff? And it's like, well, because that's a negative, use for it. And there seems to be some sort of a safeguard or filter there. So that's interesting. Finally, as Melissa Yeager writes, there is another potential problem area in the sense that holograms can be viewed pseudoscopically. Yeah, that's a word, evidently. Holograms can be viewed pseudoscopically, that is to say, inside, out, or backwards, just as well as they can be seen in proper perspective. Some of the distortions occurring may ultimately prove to be traceable to this cause, because in the out-of-body state, an individual may perceive the holographic energy patterns given off by people or things interacting in time-space reality in somewhat distorted form. So like when I look at you, I see your face. I don't see the back of your head, or I don't see inside your body or anything. They're basically saying when you're in this out-of-body type state, everything is sort of holographic. So you might see things kind of inside out, upside down, backwards, that kind of stuff. It's hard for you to really get your bearings on what's outside, inside, front, back, all that kind of stuff, because you're in this holographic thing and you're not used to operating in that world. That's interesting. 34, belief system considerations. Okay, we're at that point. So when this was first released, yeah, we're almost done, guys. I know this was a lot. We're almost done. When this was all first released, there was what was called the missing page 25. When I went to the Monroe Institute, I asked Archie about the missing. He was one of my instructors. And I asked Archie about the missing page 25 because Vice, if you remember back then, Vice News did this big thing on, because when over COVID, this all went viral because everyone was just at home bored and people started doing like TikToks and stuff on this, and it went totally viral. And Vice looked into it and they were like, wait a minute, there's a missing page 25. They pulled it out. And then when they found the missing page 25, Ark even told me, it's like Vice was calling the Monroe Institute, like saying, hey, where's this missing page? And they were making a big deal out of it, thinking that Monroe Institute like took it out to hide this information from the world or something. And turns out it was just like literally just in a shack behind Bob's cabin, which is where we were staying at the mountain. There's just this basically shack full of like file folders and stuff, right? Like all of his notes and all of his stuff. And there was just a page in there that just didn't get included in like all of this. And it was literally just a matter of them just pouring through all these boxes. It was COVID, so they didn't have anybody there at the campus. So they're just going through all the boxes trying to find it, and they finally found the missing page. So this is it. And it has to do with religion. So a lot of people thought it was, purposely omitted because of the religious implications. But I mean, compared to everything else we've talked about, this isn't even that significant. But this is the missing page 25. Number 34, belief system considerations. In 1967, Alexandra, David Neal, and Lama Yongden wrote a book entitled Secret Oral Teachings in Tibetan Buddhist Sects, from which the following quote is taken. The tangible world is movement, say the masters, not a collection of moving objects, but movement itself. There are no objects in movement. It is the movement which constitutes the objects which appear to us. They are nothing but movement. This movement is a continued and infinitely rapid succession of flashes of energy. all objects perceptible to our senses, all phenomena of whatever kind and whatever aspect they may assume, are constituted by a rapid succession of instantaneous events. The classic description of the universal hologram is to be found in a Hindu sutra which says, "In the heaven of Indra there is said to be a network of pearls so arranged that if you look at one, you see all the others reflected in it." That's like the fractal universe theory. I have cited this quotation because it shows that the concept of the universe, which at least some physicists are now coming to accept, is identical in its essence, in its essential aspects, with the one known to the learned elite in selected civilizations and cultures of high attainment in the ancient world. The concept of the cosmic egg, for example, is well known to scholars familiar with the ancient writings of the Eastern religions. Nor are the theories presented in this paper at variance with the essential tenets of the Judeo-Christian stream of thought, the concept of visible reality, i.e., the created world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent, omnipotent, and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being. The absolute at rest in infinity is a concept straight out of the Hebrew mystical philosophy. Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the absolute as presented in this paper. Essentially, they're saying this doesn't really, this isn't in any sort of contradiction with major religions. It actually confirms them, or at least supports them, or at least complements them. Just like another way. They're not personifying these things. This is just like analytical, data-driven, but like basically these ancient religions are explaining the same things. They just kind of personify them. They give everything images and names and art and style and, make it look pretty and sound good and all that kind of stuff, tell stories about it, where this is just data. But it all complements nicely. The description of energy totally at rest in infinity fits the Christian metaphysical concept of the Father, while the infinite self-conscious resides in the energy providing the motive force of will to bring a portion of that energy into motion to create reality corresponds with the sun. This is so because in order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the Absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. That hologram is a mirror image of the Absolute in infinity. That hologram is a mirror image of the Absolute in infinity. Still exists outside time and space, but is one step removed from the Absolute and is the actual agent of all creation, all reality. See, this is what I was saying earlier. The Absolute, they're saying, is God. It is the actual agent of all creation. And the eternal thought or concept of self, which results from this self-consciousness, serves the Absolute as the model around which the evolution of time-space revolves to ultimately attain a reflection of and union with Him. So they're saying that the Absolute is like the Trinity. And what the Absolute had to do, because it can't project holograms inside the Absolute, so it has to project a hologram outside of the Absolute. And then it has to be able to interact and see that hologram, and that's the sun, So the Trinity, or not the Trinity, that would be God would be the Absolute, and then the Son would be, the Father would be the Absolute, and the Son would be like the individual holograms that are projected. Yeah. Anyways, okay. That thought model, which perfectly reflects the essence or spirit of the Absolute, fits the Christian metaphysical description of the Holy Spirit. Finally, our description of the universal hologram, the torus of creation and evolution, is neither new nor original. Its use as the figure of the universe of creation, developing, and evolution is found in various stylized representations in virtually every religious system of antiquity, whether of Eastern or Western derivation. Whether it's the stylized labyrinth, once popular in the Hellenic world, the spiralized version of the Hebrew tree of life, or its Hindu counterpart, or the Chinese spiral through the fourfold powers, the ultimate meaning is the same. Mystics the world over, it seems, have perceived the universal hologram in the same spiral form and have incorporated that intuitive knowledge in their religious writings from antiquity to the present. Left brain limitations, number 35. We're almost there, guys. 20th century physics would seem to be revisiting insights belonging to mankind as far back as written records can take us. The only difference is that 20th century physics is using a left brain linear quantitative style of reasoning to approach the same knowledge which the mystics of old apparently acquired in a holistic intuitional right brain style. As a tool in the hands of our left brain culture, Gateway would seem to be a promising method for achieving the intuitive, holistic type of interface with the universal hologram needed to provide the context that thinkers like Einstein have sought in their labors to discover a unified field theory in physics. Pretty bold. They're saying that basically no one can figure out this unified theory of physics. But if they use Gateway, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they get closer than they're getting now. For persons in our profession whose concerns revolve around strategic issues, tactical questions, and matters of managerial form and system, access to a new world of intuitive perception and self-reflection would seem to offer, in the long term, the means by which to know in a truly objective way. This is so because the self-imposed limitations to balanced perception and objective logic, which our cultural and personal psychological subjectivity imposes when we use the strictly left brain thinking style, could be offset by the holistic form of perception associated with altered states of consciousness. To the extent that we come to perceive ourselves fully in the context of the portion of the universal hologram, which is a reflection of ourselves, to that extent we release ourselves from the prison of subjectivity. That's all about left brain limitations. Last sentence, let me read it again. To the extent that we come to perceive ourselves fully in the context of that portion of the universal hologram, which is a reflection of ourselves, to that extent we release ourselves from the prison of subjectivity. I'll have to ponder that one. Number 36, self-knowledge. It was axiomatic to the mystical philosophers of old that the first step in personal maturity could be expressed in the aphorism, know thyself. To them, the education of a man undertook, as its primary step, achievement of an introverted focus so that he learned what was within himself before attempting to approach the outside world. They rightly assumed that he could not effectively evaluate and cope with the world until he fully understood his personal philosophical balance, psychological balance. The insights being provided by 20th century psychology in this context through the use of various kinds of personality testing seems to be a revalidation of this ancient intuition. But no personality test or series of tests will ever replace the depth and fullness of the perception of self, which can be achieved when the mind alters its state of consciousness sufficiently to perceive the very hologram of itself, which it has projected into the universe in its proper context as part of the universal hologram in a totally holistic and intuitive way. This would seem to be one of the real promises of the Gateway experience from the standpoint of its ability to provide a portal through which, based on months, if not years of practice, the individual may pass in his search to find self, personally, effectuality, and truth in the larger sense. Basically saying you'll be able to really learn yourself, know yourself, and figure out your purpose by being able to zoom out of this physical meat suit kind of a thing that we're in and just look at, at yourself from a different perspective, from a higher perspective, less of a emotional, physical perspective and all the baggage that we carry here and be able to see like who you are at like a consciousness level. So, ancient mystics, all the mystery schools and all the initiatory, systems, they're all about know thyself. Know thyself is step one. But people know themselves in this physical world. They're like, oh, I am Bob. I'm from Ohio. And it's like, well, no, Bob, you're just, that's a temporary sojourn. You know what I mean? Like you're an eternal consciousness. Like that's what you need to get to know, not Bob from frickin' Ohio. Fucking Bob. All right. This is the we're there. We're there. Hopefully you're still awake. Number 37, motivational aspect. It is a step-by-step procedure which involves repetitive practice of the techniques concerned, using each new insight as a means of penetrating further during the next practice session. But the rate of progress is so much faster with the Gateway approach than it is with transcendental meditation or other forms of mental self-discipline, and its horizon seemed to be so much wider that the discipline needed to practice it would seem to be within the means of even the impatient, result-oriented, skeptical pragmatist of our society. Basically, they're saying, if you're not disciplined enough to be like a Buddhist freaking monk or to even like meditate, try HemiSync, try Gateway, because it sort of like fast tracks everything and it unlocks all of these potentials that would take like most people years and years, decades, if not a lifetime of recurring, deliberate, dedicated practice to get to. And you can unlock. I was in Virginia for a week and I did more wild, psychic, unworldly things in that week than I've done in my entire life combined. Shit works. Okay. That's what they're saying. They just say it more elegantly than me. Unlike yoga and other forms of Eastern mental discipline, Gateway does not require the infinite patience and total personal subservience to and faith in a system of discipline designed to absorb all the individual's energies over most of a lifetime. Rather, it will begin to produce at least minimal results within a relatively time that enough feedback is available to motivate and energize the individual to continue working with it. Last page. Conclusion number 38. There is a sound, rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering Gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. Remember, this is a report that Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonald, Military Intelligence, MI, was submitting to his superiors, which all of this became the foundation for basically the psychic spy program and all the incoming, remote viewing programs, Project Stargate and Center Lane and all those wild ones that did all crazy stuff, like remote viewing the Ark of Covenant. That was Center Lane. That was all based on this and the one-on-one experience, the Fort Meade military personnel that they sent to the Monroe Institute to one-on-one train and all that stuff. Men Who Stare at Goats, that whole movie, all that's based on the people that took this training, and all that training was based on this. This was the original assessment that started all that. This is his conclusion here, okay? And this is the very, very end, last page. You did it. I'm so proud of you. Then he says, intuitional insights of not only personal, but of a practical and professional nature would seem to be within bounds of reasonable expectations. However, a phased approach for entering the Gateway experience and an accelerated mode would seem to be required if the time needed to reach advanced states of altered consciousness is to be brought within more manageable limits from the standpoint of establishing an organization-wide exploitation of Gateway's potential. The most promising approach suggested in the foregoing study involves the following steps. A. Begin by using the Gateway hemisync tapes to achieve enhanced brain focus and to induce hemisphere synchronization. B. Then add strong REM sleep frequencies to induce left brain quiescence and deep physical relaxation. C. You taking notes? He's telling you how to do all these things. Provide hypnotic suggestion designed to enable an individual. This is creating like a step-by-step of how to turn yourself into a psychic Jedi, okay? So A, use hemisync to, get your brain entrained. B, then add strong REM sleep frequencies to induce left brain quiescence and deep physical relaxation. C, provide hypnotic suggestion designed to enable an individual to induce deep auto-hypnotic state at will. D, use auto-hypnotic suggestion to attain much enhanced focus of concentration and motivation and rapidly progressing through Focus 12 exercises. E, then repeat steps A and B following use of the auto-hypnotic suggestion that an out-of-body movement will occur and be remembered. That's all the auto-hypnotic. You're telling yourself, you're planting that seed, Your body, every cell in your body listens. It listens to your thoughts. It listens to your words. So if you tell yourself you're going to do something, you're going to do it. F, repeat step E to achieve facility in gaining out-of-body state under conscious control. Alter hypnotic suggestion to stress ability to consciously control out-of-body movement and maintain it even after REM sleep state ends. G, approach Focus 15 and 21 objectives, escape from time, space, and interact within new dimensions from the out-of-body perspective. H, it's crazy how they just say these things nonchalantly. G, approach Focus 15 and 21 objectives, which are escape from time, space, and interact within new dimensions from the out-of-body perspective. H, use multifocus approach to solve problems of distortion in terrestrial formation gathering trips. This is crazy. This approach involves the use of 3 individuals in the out-of-body state, one viewing the target objective here in time-space, one viewing it at Focus 15 as it slips into the immediate past, and one viewing it at Focus 21 as it slips from the immediate future. That is worth repeating. What they're saying is use this multi-focus approach. So you get 3 people. So say you want to remote view something, whatever it is. One person is going to remote view it now. That's going to be their intention, is I want to remote view it right now. Another person is going to say they want to remote view it from the past. So they want to put their focused awareness into a past state at that place, but in the past. Then another person is going to remote view it from the future, and they're going to combine those 3, and the 3 different reports are basically going to create this sort of like more in-depth, detailed, remote viewing session, because you're seeing it from the past, present, and the future from 3 different people. That's crazy. This multi-focus approach. That solves the problem of distortion, they're saying. Yeah, that's crazy. I like it. Encourage pursuit of full self-knowledge by all individuals involved in the foregoing experiment to enhance objectivity and out-of-body observation and thinking, and to remove personal energy blockages likely to retard rapid progress. I honestly, at this point, I don't even know what the fuck that means, and I'm not going to reread that one because we're 2 away from the end. Be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. I mean, that is saying be prepared for whenever you run into an alien, don't freak out. I mean, they're literally telling you that. Be intellectually prepared. They're telling you, get your mind right because you're going into a crazy world. Get your mind right because you're not the alpha when you're out there. Get your mind right because there's things out there that you can't understand and that have abilities that far surpass yours and that can use consciousness in ways that you don't know how to. So be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. Wild. I mean, I've met these things. I've been in those places and I've been face-to-face with things that are hard to explain. You come back and I've done multiple videos on this. I can try to explain it, but it's like explaining a dream. It makes sense to you. It doesn't make sense to anybody else. Arrange to have groups of people in Focus 12 state unite their altered consciousness to build holographic patterns around sensitive areas to repulse possible unwanted out-of-body presences. Remember, he's telling all this to Army, higher-ups. So he's saying arrange to have groups of people in Focus 12 state. So groups of people, multiple people in a out-of-body state, in a Focus 12 state, unite their altered consciousnesses. So unite their consciousnesses to build this basically protective barrier, like a force field around sensitive areas to repulse adversarial people, like the other psychic spies. There's this whole war going on, like a psychic war going on. So we're out there doing espionage and stuff and messing with, you can tinker with physical matter. You can mess with stuff, psychically. And we're doing it to our adversaries and they're doing it to us. So he's saying that you can get multiple people and basically have them create this psychic mental consciousness barrier around things. Encourage more advanced gateway participants to build holographic patterns of successful attainment and rapid progress for advanced colleagues to assist them in progressing through the gateway system. If these experiments are carried through, it is to be hoped that we will truly find a gateway to gateway and to the realm of practical application for the whole system of techniques which comprise it. Holy cow, guys. So that, my friends, was the analysis and assessment of the gateway process. We went through it basically word for word. We broke it down. We had some aha moments, some holy shit moments, some head blowing moments, all sorts of moments. We've laughed. We've cried. We've come closer together. Hopefully a few of y'all are still awake. That was nuts. That was a lot. My computer's about to die. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for hanging in there. That one you definitely are going to have to watch a couple times. I know it's a lot, but there's some information in there that is just nuts. I mean, we covered everything. We covered dimensions and aliens and God and healing and manifesting and remote viewing and time travel and out of body. And oh my God, all that. Freaking nuts. What are we going to do next week? I don't know. But watch this a couple times. Please comment, share, subscribe, spread this out there. I think this information is important. I think it's a big deal. I don't think people got it 20 years ago. I think people are starting to get it now. And hopefully this video helped. Thank you guys so much. Love you all. See you in the next video. Peace.